North Shore, Lake Superior, all that stuff is like,
Joe's Island.
Me too.
Joe's Island.
Cool, cool.
Right in the
Well, hey, welcome everybody. My name is Craig Spicer with the Lieutenant Park District, and I'm your host today, but I'm definitely not the show today. You all came for this guy over here, but a little bit about him. I personally have had the pleasure of knowing Eric for a number of years now. He's been a big inspiration for me personally, and I'm sure he might have been an inspiration for some of you other kayakers in the room as well. He's a member of the American Canoe Association. He's an instructor at Coastal Kayaking Level 3, so he'll get you out onto the open water and make sure you're safe enough, or at least mitigate the risk, right? That's the proper terminology. He's also a member of the Northwest Ohio River Runners and Toledo River Gang. He's a foundational member in both of those groups. He also is founder and host of the South Bass Island Kayak Rendezvous. Raise your hands if you've been there or at least know of it.
Yes.
Now,
20 years.
Raise your hand if it's an absolutely good time. Okay. Yeah, so if you're a kayaker and you're not aware of that, you need to go to the South Bass Island Kayak Rendezvous at the beginning of June. A little bit about this guy's character. He personally escorted me and another kayaker first time on open water from mainland to the South Bass Island. That was my first open water venture. Oh, yeah. He was the guy who kind of brought us along. I was terrified, I was stiff, but guess who didn't flip? Guess who did flip?
Me? Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You're looking at the cliff.
I was demonstrating. I stayed in the boat, though, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
Bath day.
Every time that I hear about one of this guy's adventures, I really want to sell everything else and just dive headfirst into touring kayaking. Unfortunately, my wife doesn't let me do that. But I'm sure that this is going to be an inspirational talk for all of you. It definitely always is for me. So I'll get out of the way. Everybody, please welcome Eric Slout.
Thank you. All right, I think we got to go here. Everyone can hear me? Got it? All right, fantastic. Well, I appreciate the introduction there, and I appreciate being asked to come back and do one of these base camp discussions again. I know we've done this, what, 4 or 5 years now, so as long as I keep not running out of trips and you keep asking me back, because I've been paddling, this area in the Great Lakes for over 20 years, probably closer to 25 years, and as you kind of gain experience and skills and groups of friends and whatnot, your boundaries kind of expand a little bit. So you go from paddling around here to Lake Erie, and before you know it, you're on Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, and before you know it, you're all over the Great Lakes. So I always try to do trips I think that are somewhat doable. I have done one of these trip reports where it was Mishpecotton Island, and that was one of those trips that's like once in a lifetime kind of thing. But a trip like this, or even I've done a talk on the Massasauga Provincial Park, all Georgian Bay based locations that are fairly easy to get to as far as driving, fairly protected, and there's, usually when you go into a situation like this, there's areas where you can go depending on the wind and waves that are, protected and easier and not as white knuckle type paddling. But again, you're only as good as the weather and your gear and your skills and whatnot. But this is a trip that I took last summer, and I brought a fact checker along with me. Dr. Jeff Peters is sitting back there in the blue coat there. So yeah, when I told you I fought off that bear, he can raise his hand and say he saw it. But Jeff and I have been kayaking for a bunch of years together, and finally got him out here on an extended sea kayaking trip. And so we had him and some of the other guys of our group that I've been paddling with for a while. So again, I always appreciate doing this kind of stuff. It's a kind of joke because I get to share my vacation photos with you all, like back in the old days with slideshows kind of thing. But I'm a kayak guy. I love kayaks. I always bring a little bit of gear here because I always generate some questions based on how do we do it, what do we do, those kinds of things. So I do have some gear. So if you want to check it out, touch it, feel it, you can take a look at that later. I got some safety gear things there too if you have questions. So if you have any questions about the presentation, kayaking in general, kayaking around here, the region, that kind of stuff, I'm pretty knowledgeable when it comes to those types of things too. So just raise your hand and ask those questions. Craig did mention the South Bass Island Kayak Rendezvous. This will be the 20th anniversary of that event. So we kind of started as a little nugget of an event on South Bass Island, and we've been gathering there on the same weekend, the second weekend after Memorial Day, and this will be the 20th year that we've been out there. So when you look at some of the symposiums and some of the things that happen around the Great Lakes related to kayaking, we're now beginning one of the longer ones to be out there. So it's a fun gathering. So, all right, so I've got some charts and some maps and things that we took with us on the trip. Now, we had planned this trip because we all kind of had some, limited amount of time. Again, I'd love to leave and disappear for 3-4 weeks at a time, but sometimes it's not capable to do that with jobs and responsibilities. So we took 6 days, 5 nights, and kind of looked at the map of the chart and say, okay, where can we go? We want to go into Canada. We all had our passports, and where can we get to fairly quickly to do a nice out and back trip? This was a trip that didn't require a shuttle. I've done a lot of trips too where you drop your gear, shuttle your cars, and it adds a complexity to it, especially with time and driving and coming and going. So this was a trip that we could get up to north of Perry Sound, launch from Snug Harbor. And Snug Harbor is a very popular location to put in and take out for different kayak trips. And then you can scoot out to Franklin Island and then on out another 4 or 5 kilometers out to the Mink and McCoy Islands. So I did this trip in 2007. So I was just a kid when I did this trip the first time. And so I was able to circle back and do it, 16 years later. So with that being said, all right, is this little thing on? Wait, where do I point there or there? Which one? That makes a noise. Is it on? Oh, there we go. Here we go. Here's the crew. So you got me, my buddy Lee Brothers, Kelly McCray, his buddy Scott, and then Jeff back there in the corner. So it was the 5 of us that went out for the time period. All light gear. We all had sea kayaks. We all had various different camping gears. I've been fortunate in the Georgian Bay area. I kind of prefer to hammock camp, which is a whole other kind of black hole of gear if you want to get into the gear discussion versus just normal tent camping. And I think Kelly he kind of dual branded it. He had tents and hammocks, or no, Lee did, and then Jeff and I were hammocking, so it was a good location for it. I have been in some locations where the trees just aren't big enough, especially if you get in that eastern side of Georgian Bay. You get those west winds and all the trees are kind of slanted this way a little bit and all the branches are pointing that way. Sometimes you have to go inland a little bit to find trees that are capable enough to hang from. But there's the crew there. Hit the right button. All right, what'd I do? Oh, there we go. Oh, there's no picture of the crew. So, sunburned. So, this has got a pointer, right? Ooh. All right, so where the little star is, right here, this is Snug Harbor. And it's just a little marina. You kind of get into cottage country in here a little bit up in this channel. So we put in a Snug Harbor, and I've been up this channel here around Franklin Island, and we've done the outside there. You get into some cottage country here. A lot of float planes. People fly their float planes in. They got the little ramps that they put the float planes up onto. There's a really cool Snug Harbor lighthouse right here, and this outer shoreline of Franklin Island is pretty rugged. There's all kinds of inner bays that people will anchor off into. And a lot of fun places to kayak that you can get back into, and it just keeps winding back in as it goes into the island. And we kind of, on this trip, came out of Snug Harbor, went up the west shore of Franklin Island, out off of Adnac Island there, and then shot out to Big McCoy and Little McCoy, and did it as a big out and back loop. So we did a big loop of the islands. Overall, we probably did 50 miles of water. We did some base camping. I've done trips where you are picking up every night and moving. This trip we camped on Big McCoy for a few nights, did some day paddling, exploring around, and then came down to Green Island and stayed there for a couple nights before we came back to Franklin Island and camping for another night. So it was 5 nights, 6 days. All right, I got to figure out which button is actually, oh, there's the pointer. Okay, yeah, there we go. All right, I got to be smarter than the clicker. Oh. Yeah, which button am I? I'm not hitting something. Right here. Is that the one? All right. This one, all right, that's backwards and forwards. All right, so there's an actual chart of what we did. It kind of gives a little more perspective of where we were. Again, Snug Harbor, Big McCoy, Little McCoy, and all the way down through the, and it ends at the Red Rock Lighthouse, which is down here. Like right there's Red Rock Lighthouse, which is actually kind of cool. I got a picture of that too. So that's just a public chart that is available. You can purchase there. So getting there, so we started down here in the Toledo area, crossed over Detroit, scooted across that north shore of Lake Erie, took a left at Toronto. Massive amount of traffic. If you've ever been around Toronto, you see Toronto forever. And there's Toronto, look, there's Toronto again. You keep on going, and then you kind of make that left and head up. And once you start getting north and you get in that north country feel, the air smells different, the trees look different. It's just a different feeling once you get into those kind of upper parts of Canada there. And then you get up to Parry Sound, and then get up to Franklin Island. So. Yeah, so this is the Bruce Peninsula. You have Parry Sound right here. If you saw my Massasauga Provincial Park talk, that's right down here. Then you get up into the French River and all this. It's called the 30,000 Islands region. So yeah, this part is considered the 30,000 Islands. Franklin Island was named after the famous Arctic explorer John Franklin. He kind of passed through the area. I guess he was going by and said, hey, let's name this Franklin Island. So he did that in 1828. As a lot of that area of Canada, just a long history of fur trading, lots of lumber. They kind of lumbered it out, and that's kind of where Parry Sound got its reputation as a lumber town. And then they started moving inland, and some decent amount of commercial fishing there, but it's still pretty rugged. Even when I did my talk, I did my research about the Massasauga Provincial Park, and my grandfather had owned an island. Even in the 1950s, it was hard to get into. It's still single track. It's like logging roads in that part of Canada. So there's not a whole lot there. And then, if you ever know anything, have you ever heard of the Group of Seven? Has anyone heard of the Group of Seven artists? Canadian artists. If you've seen any of their artwork, it is this area. It's the 30,000 Islands, it's Canada, it's the shoreline, it's the Parry Sound Island area. And so they were very popular in the 1910s and 20s. So what you see some of the pictures is what you see some of their paintings look like. There you go. How does it go black? Oh. Yep, so roads are still sparse in the 50s. So the Mink and McCoy Island chain that we kind of came down through is 8 kilometers. It's only about 5 miles long, but the amount of shoreline you can paddle is probably 4 or 5 times that. And then the islands themselves are a mixture of public, private, nature conservancy. Again, Canadians are very, indebted in keeping, public land public and having access to it. It's amazing though. It's all, public, and also there's a private island right in the middle of a grouping of things. It's kind of weird, but it's mostly Crown land. We didn't get any permits or anything like that to camp up there. I think we did some research, and if you're below the 45th parallel, and there's a whole bunch of combination of stuff, even as U.S. citizens, we didn't need to get any additional permits, but it was Crown land, and there's nobody out there checking for permits or anything like that. And then the geology of this area, and you'll see from one island to the next, it's amazing to see the molten rock and quartz and all the stuff that makes up these islands as the glaciers came through and thrust and thaw and and some of the dramatic things that happened through the geology of the time there. I'm sorry. It's mostly Precambrian exposed bedrock, lots of quartz, feldspar, and the last glacier came there, over 11,000 years ago. So Group of Seven, this is, if you haven't seen any of their artwork, I threw a couple of pictures in there. Again, you can go online and find all kinds of examples of what they did. Okay. So we launched in Snug Harbor. Again, it's just a little marina. The little blue building there is actually a little restaurant. Great seafood. They got great whitefish and trout and everything like that. My first trip up there in 2007, we actually scheduled to have a breakfast there. They weren't open for breakfast, but we called ahead and they cooked a breakfast. We had a big group of people and cooked breakfast, and then we launched from Snug Harbor out for our trip there. So as you're leaving Snug Harbor and you get into the kind of Canadian wilderness, you see the Snug Harbor Lighthouse there. So that's what you see kind of leaving out of the harbor. And you can see on the lighthouse there's kind of a black strip going on the one side of it, and that's for the float planes. There's another marker a little bit further out that as they're coming in to land, they line those markers up, and they're able to find the landing spot there in the harbor. So again, we're coming out of the harbor there. And the goal, we drove all day on a Wednesday, so the goal was just to get out and get onto Frank Island and just camp for the first night. So there's a really cool campsite on one far end of Franklin Island, and it was kind of occupied. And the whole trip, we had really good days, but then we had really kind of crappy nights. A lot of wind, rain a couple of nights, a lot of blowing. So we went back into one of the back harbor bays on Franklin Island and found a place that we could get our boats up onto, and it was flat enough to get our camping gear up onto. And kind of give you an idea, this is our campsite. So that's my hammock system with my tarp there, and kind of looking out into Georgian Bay from this little back bay. So we're just off the water enough to kind of get out of the wind and just kind of be able to put our gear up. So then this is kind of looking out our little campsite there, and our boats are down here. And there I am standing next to the boats. And so I got kind of a funny, let me go back one. All right, so see the boats? The boats are all lined up on shore. So the water is crystal clear. You can see, hundreds of feet, if it is 100 feet, but you can see clear to the bottom. But right at the water line, the rocks get a little slimy and a little slippery. And has anybody ever tried to step over a line that's about that far off the ground, and you think you step over it, and you somehow still catch your toe? Well, I kind of have a rule of, I hate to step over boats and gear and whatnot. So I was kind of getting some stuff out of my boat, and I got ready for bed. I had my, my warm clothes on that I was going to sleep in that night, and I was messing around, and I think Jeff was standing there, and I swear to God, I'd stepped over a boat or whatever, and I caught my toe or whatnot. Well, I hit the edge of that water line, and it is the slipperiest surface I've ever stepped on in my life. I think I went upside down 3 times. I slipped, but it shows you. I mean, we weren't too far back country, but it didn't take much. I mean, I really could have hurt myself, but I ended up in the water, fully dressed, and I had my capoline on that I was going to wear the whole trip and whatnot. I ended up on my head. I had a ball cap on, and I sanded a hole through the hat because I slid on my head down the rocks into the water. And it was just I swear to God, I got my foot over the top of the boat, but I clipped my toe, and man, I went in the water, and it was all over at that point. So here I was with a big green slimy sleeve of gunk, and I had my pants on. I was the whole thing was a hot mess. So yeah, I spent the next half an hour kind of rinsing stuff off and getting cleaned up and a change of clothes, and luckily I didn't have a noggin, a big knot on my head or anything like that. But I've been places where you've been so far back into the country that if you would have gotten hurt, it's tough. I mean, there's no one around. There's not an ambulance or 911 that's going to come and get you. But I learned my lesson there. I was trying to be careful, and I kind of went to the end of the boat where it was skinnier. I didn't step over the middle of the boat. I kind of went towards the end, and it obviously backfired on me. So this is kind of the evening. This thing is going down, and again, I mentioned someone's for hammock camping, so that's Jeff's setup over there, and just you got to find 2 trees that are far enough apart to be able to hang your gear. But if you get into that, it's a wonderful way to camp. The comfort is there. We even weathered a pretty good couple of storms that you kind of ride it out. You don't have to worry about ground being flat. The water, we've been places where the water's running underneath your butt, and where a tent you can get wet, where the hammock just sort of kind of, goes away. So I'm a big advocate for that kind of camping. For me, it works for what I do. So this is officially the first big day that we decided to go. We want to go from Franklin Island out, the outer islands out to Big McCoy, where we intended to camp. And as I'm taking pictures, I always make little something in the sand or rocks, because I can keep the photos organized when I do it. But the fun part is you're going there. Again, there's all these little back bays you can duck into, and they just keep going and going and going, and you can spend just days just exploring in these little back bays. Sometimes the water's a foot deep. Sometimes it's 50 foot deep, and you can completely see all the way to the bottom. So again, just from the first picture of these, look at this. You got this kind of rock with a lichen on it, and then look at this. You got that red sandstone in another spot. I mean, it's just if you're into geology, I mean, you just be all day looking at the surface and under the surface and the water, and it's just when the sun hits it, it's spectacular. So as we're going along the shoreline of Big McCoy Island, we saw sand, and sand is pretty rare. There's not a whole lot of sand there. And it just so happens that it was a spectacular campsite. And we're like, oh man, we camped, that way a mile or so. And so we got out and explored. We kind of made a mental note. Somebody had picked up a lot of little riffraff stuff and kind of made like a little, kind of like a camp stove kind of thing, and had a little bench area. And we thought, man, this would be a pretty good place to come and camp. So we thought, well, maybe we'll catch this on the way back. So we walked around for a little bit. Right behind here is a big dammed up beaver lake on the back side of it. And so we ended up having lunch here and just kind of hung out and explored a little bit before we went our way. But yeah, it was a kind of a neat spot to be able to pull your boats up. And I think it's pretty much the only sand we saw the entire trip, right? So eventually we make it out to Big McCoy, and again, it's crown land. You can go wherever, and usually you can see where people camped because there's no place to put like a tent stake. There's piles of rocks. So that's where you tie your tent off to the, tie it to a little rock and pile it with 3 other rocks. So you can see all these little campsites all over the place that people have camped over the years. And sometimes you're scratching your head going, really, some guy camped there? That's kind of odd. But we found this little back bay that had this kind of slope that we can get up to, and it was flat enough to be able to spread out a little bit, because when you're camping with a group, you don't want to be right on top of each other. So we were able to spread out a little bit. So here we are kind of coming into Big McCoy there, and kind of a neat picture looking down through there. So again, we kind of spread out a little bit. We had Kelly and Scott were kind of on the front part of the campsite, and Jeff and I were kind of tucked back in the trees with our hammock system set up there. And again, we had some weather. We were setting up, and some rain and wind kind of blew through the area. And I don't know if it's kind of ideal campsite for your setup. I don't know if it was the top one, but hey, you're able to hang, right? It was important because that night we had some serious rain that night after dinner. And then Lee had his kind of setup there. Now he had a setup that was a hammock, but if he needed to, he could go to the ground. His hammock had a couple of like kind of spreader bar, kind of like tent poles, and he could stake it out on the ground if he wanted to. So he had kind of a combo setup. And here I am, in the hammock, kind of camping, and it kind of shows you the layers. I got a fleece layer. So I got a fleece layer. So here's the hammock, the red part. Here's a fleece layer. Then I got an underquilt, which is another, not fleece, but down. I got a down blanket, a down underquilt, and then this little blue thing is an underquilt protector, which I bought, and it's just a nothing little nylon thing, but when the wind is really blowing and you get rain coming sideways, it kind of protects your gear. It kind of adds another layer of rain protection underneath your setup there. But to get the combination of layers traps the heat, and it keeps you warm. Again, looking out kind of underneath the tent fly there, tarp looking out under our campsite. So when we go, we try not to starve. I kind of enjoy eating on these trips. So we usually kind of do your own thing for breakfast and lunch, and then dinner we kind of come together and everybody kind of throws in a little bit of something. It kind of ends up being kind of a stone soup kind of thing that everybody kind of throws in whatever. But Jeff and I like to eat, so we put in some pretty good stuff. So these were pizza bagels. And there's a butter substitute you can get. You can put on the bagels. We kind of toast them on our camp stove, and then kind of made like a little pizza oven there. And it was all stuff that didn't spoil, and it preserves for a while. So we had the cheese and the peppers and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of a fun backcountry meal. I think we perfected the pizza thing. Actually, it looks pretty good. There's kind of a panoramic shot of our campsite that we paddled into. You can see we're kind of protected back in this little bay. And it had a real nice little ridge area that we can sit on. We all brought our chairs up and had a little beverage, and we were able to watch the sunset from here. Friend Lee took that shot, panoramic shot. It's kind of cool. There we go. There's a sunset cruise, so you can look and kind of see the sunset going down there. And you can kind of see as it goes bloop, 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 kind of disappears along the horizon there. So the next day, we wanted to go out to Little McCoy Island, and Little McCoy Island was a private island that was donated back to the Nature Conservancy, and it's off limits from camping, but you can go out and visit it, and it's just another island. It has a lot of inlets and things in neat shoreline you can explore. Had this little sign there that dedicates it to the Georgian Bay Trust. So we just had fun just day paddling. It's kind of nice not to have to pick up your gear. We knew we had a camp we can come back to. So So we went from around Little McCoy, and then there's another set of Slate Islands, which is a little further out from there. And we had a pretty good west wind that day, too. So it's kind of fun. If you know anything about moving water and eddy hopping on moving water, it was the same thing on open water. All these rocks, you'd kind of look for that windbreak, and you would kind of eddy hop between the rocks as you kind of, you kind of ferry between them across the current that was coming around the rocks and kind of worked your way out. And it's kind of fun to see how far you could kind of, kind of get out there. But yeah, we kind of zigzagged our way through. Now, we say 30,000 islands. I mean, look at that. Some of those, islands are about a foot off the water, which is, even in a kayak, you're paddling along, and all of a sudden, boom, you hit something. You think you'd be able to see it, but it'll go from 50 to 100 feet to 0 in a heartbeat. So I can't imagine if you're on a powerboat out there, you have to really keep your eyes open. So yeah, we went out to the Limestone Islands, and we had lunch out there. I mean, again, it's fun going for your base camp and heading on further out to another set of islands and, being able to get out and take a break. So here's a lunch spot that we had. Again, this island isn't much more than just a little hump of rock. But again, you go 10 feet offshore, and it drops to the bottom 100 feet. Yeah, look at that. That's the island. So you get taking a little nap there on the nice warm sandstone. There's just enough of a lip there to get out of the wind. And check out, there's Lee on this little, again, just a little hump of island that from a distance looked like he was standing on the water. So, yeah, another meal time. We came back to our big McCoy camp. It's kind of neat. We had this the rock where we were sitting on the sunset was kind of a nice little windbreak that we can get behind, and we needed it. I mean, again, you get the prevailing winds coming out of the west, and you sometimes just want to get out of the wind. So that was taco night. I don't think it was Tuesday, but it was Taco Thursday maybe. So we were, again, it's easy to pack in, tomatoes and peppers and that kind of stuff, and we had enough stuff to keep the, other condiments cold. Then you got to have your, Chipotle Tabasco sauce too, fresh guacamole. So now we wanted to leave Big McCoy Island, and we wanted to work our way down through the Mink and McCoys, with the kind of the end island being Green Island, and it's kind of about midway because we want to go there and day paddle. So again, we're all packing up and ready to go on day 3, and then there's some of the shoreline as you can see as you're kind of weaving your way down through the islands. So we had good days during the the daytime portion of the trip, but man, nighttime it would get ugly. It would get a little windy and ugly. There you go. This is the fun stuff. So you get those waves that come in and hit the other rocks and come back and hit the waves coming at it. It's called Cappilatus waves. It's always fun kind of weaving your way along the shoreline like that and kind of riding the elevator up and down. And again, you kind of, in a sea kayak, you're so connected to the water. It's so much fun kind of finding your way along there, and you're constantly working out in your brain which way you're going to go, and kind of doing the geometry on it, and hopefully you don't get washed into the rocks. You get into trouble there, but you're able to kind of ride it in and ride it out. So we made it down into the Green Island area, again, a lot more of the same kind of Precambrian sandstone. There's one point we found a chain of islands that went way back in, and then they connected, and then there's a couple spots where we had to kind of use our hands to kind of scoot through to get through one little bay to another bay. And then Green Island itself was pretty rugged. There were smaller campsites, but not really one campsite for all of us. So we did have to kind of break up. Jeff and I, with our hammocks, were able to kind of camp on this side of the island, and then around the corner, the other 3 guys kind of hung out there. Now, this is an island I camped on in 2007, and I had pictures I was looking at, and I was trying to match up stuff, but man, it's amazing how things change from, 15, 18 years to the next. Things look very, very different. Actually, I was going back through some photos. In 2007, there was this tree that looked like a trident. It had 3 big stalks, and I was going back through some pictures when I was putting the presentation together. I think I found that tree, but it was half dead and fallen over, but I think you can still see the base of where it was. But the fun thing is, when you get to these islands, you're there, you're set up. I enjoy hiking, because a lot of these small little humps of sandstone that go way out into the lake. You can hike the perimeter, but then you also really hike way out along the perimeter of all these little rock formations. So Jeff and I did a couple of long hikes and circumnavigated the islands, and there's little bays and whatnot, kind of rock hop. So this is, you went around the corner, so the other guys were. So here's that tree See right here, you see the 3 stalks of this tree? There's another branch over here. And in 2007, it was a full tree. It was all, fully alive and everything. So I think I found the one campsite. But the lead went to ground, and the other guys had their campsites. I think I liked our hammocks a little bit better. So again, on our hike around, we found these like posts driven into the rock, and I don't know, I can't imagine what they were. Held something at one point in time. I don't know, a dock or something. I don't know what they were. But I think we eventually went all the way out on that point, this far point. You could walk around and come all the way back out into here and kind of circumnavigate the island. So again, look at this. You get the change in scenery as you're kind of hiking around the islands. So the dinner time at this campsite, the wind did die down, and when the wind dies down, what happens? The bugs tend to come up. So I think we attempted to cook kind of by our campsite, and it didn't work so well. So we loaded up and kind of went out on this little spit out here where the boats were, just to get a little bit of puff of breeze of something that could keep the bugs at bay. So we ended up having dinner out there. I can't remember what we had that night. We didn't have any pictures. I don't know what we ate. We ate good. I just don't remember what we ate. And then we did have a little, I think it was the only campfire we had. There was a little carved out little campfire area at this campsite. So Jeff and I fired it up and kind of watched the sunset go down, and a little extra smoke and whatnot kept the bugs at bay. So we woke up the next morning. The intent was to go from Green Island back over to Franklin Island. So you had a good, 4 kilometer, maybe 5 kilometer paddle back over, not really the mainland, back over to the biggest part of the islands over there. And it was kind of ugly. There was white caps as far as you could see, and the wind and rain was coming down. And I had a wet breakfast underneath my tarp there. So I had, I guess, some oatmeal and just kind of waited it out. And we waited there all day. We didn't leave there till 2, 3 o'clock probably. Kind of waiting for the wind to die down. And it shows you the difference here of the pictures. So the upper picture was the morning there, and by the time we left, we had that. So it showed you how the wind and weather can change, and if you got time, sometimes you got to wait it out. I've been on trips too where you do have, you have to build in weather days, and I've been weathered in, and you're like, well, you can't really go anywhere. Safety first, right? So, but yeah, it just shows you the difference in just a few hours as the kind of the storm system blew through. And then over here, where our campsite was, it's the leave no trace kind of principle. We were set up, and when we picked up these bags and we're gone, you couldn't even tell we were there. So that's one thing we do as kayak campers. So that first campsite that we saw on Franklin Island had kind of the set-up kitchen area. Once we found that, we got to go back there. So we kind of knew where it was at on our chart, because I've been on trips too where you do plot out your course bearings and headings and all that kind of stuff. This trip was kind of going to be an out and back, and it wasn't so far that if we had to make a crossing, we were going to get lost or miss something. I mean, you can, in a fog or something like that, go right by an island if you don't have your right heading. But we knew kind of where we were going and kind of approximately where this was at, because we knew there was another land feature. So it's kind of fun doing some navigating on the fly and following the chart. And we, boom, you couldn't see it. Even over, 5 kilometers, it's kind of hard to, see some points of land. So we kind of dead reckoned, and we ended up coming right out at the beach. And it's that's pretty cool, So we had pretty good, we had a little bit of following seas, I think, a little bit of push as we kind of surfed across the crossing there to get back to Franklin Island. But you can see it was still kind of wet and everything. A storm system has still come through. And we tried to set up, and so trying to set up a hammock in a hurricane force wind is not easy. So that is one of the downfalls. So right around that little kitchen area, there's a couple of trees. I'm like, that's gonna be perfect. Right there, I have dinner right there, and set my hammock right there, and I tried to hook it up. And I mean, the wind, it was just whipping. I couldn't get it set up. It would have been a miserable evening. So I said, screw it. I grabbed my stuff and I went back, and just on the other side of the campsite was this little beaver lake area over here. There's a dammed up beaver area. And so I got 75 yards out of the wind, and I set my campsite up there. I think everybody else kind of was more on the front side of the campsite, and I think I was the only smart one. I don't know how well you slept that night.
You were setting up broadside.
Yeah, you might have, I was trying to set up broadside and you had like this, but you still have the wind shooting down that tunnel, your tarp there. But
Wasn't that the meteor night too?
so after we got there, we did have the meteor night. So everybody else kind of set up here around the little campfire, little table area. I guess Jeff, there's the other guys right there, and I'm way back in the woods. But yeah, Jeff mentioned that we knew there was a meteor shower, one of those annual meteor showers that happens at that point of the year. Oh yeah, I did fail to mention this was late July, early August? Mid-August. We went there. So yeah, there's a meteor shower, and it just so happened all that wind had cleared away the clouds. And after dinner, we just laid on these benches and just watched the meteors shoot. I mean, again, when you get places without the ambient light, it's awesome. You know, it's just it's black as all can be, and you see more stars than you ever thought you'd see in the sky. And it's even cooler when they're zipping by you, and you see the vapor trails of the meteors. But it was a neat place. It was a nice kind of fitting end to kind of one of our last nights out there. And so we just kind of, it was after midnight before we all kind of crashed, and I decided to call it a night. It's hard to get pictures of too, because you're watching, and Jeff's over here, hey, I saw one. Oh, I just missed it. And then, oh, there's one over there. And you're kind of like, eventually you're like, I must stay right here until I see one, and they go shooting above your head there. So the next morning, this might have been still the same day, you can see it's a cruise ship. So Perry Sound is a fairly large port. It's a big marina area, but there are cruise ships that go through the Great Lakes. So I'm kind of like, I think I was down with my boat doing something. I look up and I see this cruise ship coming out of there. And on our way home, we stopped in Perry Sound and had lunch. And I think I talked to one of the ladies at the restaurant we were at. They said, oh yeah, they anchor out in the harbor. There's really not a dock big enough for them to dock and have people get off, but they'll kind of anchor out in the harbor and they'll run shuttles back and forth into the little town of Perry Sound and do the touristy type things and do that. But yeah, it's not something you see every day on the Great Lakes as a cruise ship. So again, another sunset. We were sitting there right before the meteor shower. So it got cold. So even with the wind, it was cold. So they get a little, again, when you do this kind of stuff, you see it all, you pack for all, you have contingencies for wind, waves, weather, cold, hot, all that kind of stuff, anywhere from shorts to your thermal gear. And I needed it. There was a couple of nights there. It got cold. Even you're not that far north, but you're in August and you're wearing snoodle caps and in your hammock and with all the down and everything that you've got packed. So it's pretty chilly. But it's kind of cool to look out my hammock and kind of look over and see that lake there, and you hear the beaver, splashing their tails and kind of doing their thing to wake you up in the morning. So that morning, Jeff and we took off, and the other three guys, they were going to stay an extra day or so. So we took off, and it was maybe 3 or 4 miles to get back into Perry Sound. So we took off and kind of zigzagged around. And again, the wind and waves were not easy that morning. It was an easy paddle, but we kind of handrailed the coastline and made it back around into Perry Sound. So there you can see the range light with the black stripe on it. So we get back into Snug Harbor, and the kayaking community is small but big, and the internet connects a lot of people and whatnot. And so I kind of have I have friends all over the Great Lakes, so I can tap into information and whatnot if I'm planning on doing a trip or if I just need some information or whatnot. So I'm standing there. We're halfway up into Ontario, Snug Harbor, and I look over and I see this guy. This guy's name's Jeff Aubring, and we've been friends through kayaking on Facebook for probably 8 or 9 years. And all the time we're chatting. He's on the North Shore of Lake Erie, we're on the South Shore. And so I'm standing there, I'm like, Jeff Aubring. Like here I'm in the middle of Canada, and here's this dude I've never met before. I know him, we're like good buddies, and we've tried to do trips together in the past, and it just hasn't worked out. And so he's standing there at the takeout. So I'm like, how funny is that? So we actually got to see each other for the first time at this trip, standing there at the takeout. So I thought that was pretty cool. But kayakers are awesome people, so we stood and talked for a little bit. And he was actually there. He's got a fairly high level of certification in Paddle Canada, and he was leading a group doing some training for the Ontario Kayak Center up there, which is another really cool place. If you get a chance to check that out. They do some glamping, and they do a lot of kayaking instruction and whatnot. A lot of really cool programs up there. But this to show you what Snug Harbor is, there's a group here that was getting ready to go out. And then just over here on the other side of the put-in was another group of lady kayakers that were going to head out and do a training over several days. So it's kind of a busy place to go. We were coming, and two groups were getting ready to go out. We called ahead of time to Gillies, was the restaurant there, and you can reserve parking, and it was like $5 a day or something like that. And they have reserved parking for you there. But just small world. There's a guy I've never met before that poof, we just happened to be there the day that we're there. So, the end. But wait, there's more. Get the commercial going. So there we're all loaded for home there, right at Snug Harbor. But there's always some fun stuff here. So again, we talked about the geology, just the different colors and the things that you see. Again, you could, if you're into that kind of thing, you could be just standing there looking at your feet, walking along the shoreline forever. This is kind of, here you have this, all the sandstone, you have this granite rock that's just sitting here that was deposited by some glacier or whatever right here. Then you see all the molten, twisted hunks of stuff. Again, I wish I was a geologist to have more appreciation for it, but it's just neat to paddle along, and it changes, your scenery changes, the entire shoreline. I thought this kind of, so this is our first campsite at Franklin, or Big McCoy, and Lee was back here in the trees where he was camping, and these two cords, it looked like burnout marks, like somebody had driven a truck or something into the trees, and they're like perfectly parallel. And I just thought that was kind of neat, just kind of, again, right at our campsite. And then you get, again, all this twisted little stuff here. It's just neat, I wish I was more appreciative. I could probably talk about it if I was more of a geologist there, but it's kind of cool. You get this big vein of quartz right here, right in the rocks. And then just these little stair steps down here, down into the water. And again, you're paddling through all these little coves and bays and everything. The water is so crystal clear. So I got a kick out of this. So people are like, how do you do your deed kind of thing? So there's a group up there that maintains thunderboxes. You ever heard of a thunderbox? So they have thunderboxes. So I have a background in fundraising, and so I find it was kind of comical in a weird sense of way that you lift the lid to the commode, please donate to the Outer Island Stewardship Project. And then it gets even better that over here you got a QR code. So you could be standing there doing your stuff, and you can QR code them some money. But they do a great job. They maintain these, and again, you get a bunch of random people out there doing their stuff in the woods, and this kind of keeps it a little more clean and tidy and whatnot. But I always thought that was kind of funny. So, but there's people out there that really care about what goes on. So you can donate to their Thunderbox Fund. So you're at a campsite, and sometimes you got to look around. See that little blue thing right there? That indicates that there is a Thunderbox, a place to do your business there. But you got to kind of look for them. They're not easy to see, and a lot of times there's not much more than just a 2-foot dug hole with the little pine box with a lid on it. Now, Franklin Island does have a population of bears, and I've been there several times now. Luckily, knock on wood, and we have not encountered them, but there are bears out on the island. So I mentioned the float planes earlier. We had that. And then, here's the boat in, the charts. This particular case, I had some charts from a previous trip that I just went to Kinko's and had them laminated, and I got a chart case, and it sits on your, the deck of your boat. And especially when you get in an island situation, you're kind of counting islands, and you're looking for landmarks, and you're kind of looking up and down. I kind of prefer charts. I mean, you can use GPSs, but batteries can fail and things can go bad. So I always like to have the backup opportunity to look at the chart, and I enjoy it. I enjoy following along where we're at. So we did this, like I said, I did this trip in 2007. Again, I was just a kid back then. Look at all the gray hair now. So this is out on Franklin Island, the first campsite. And you can see it's very different. You know, we're kind of all tent camped there along the shoreline. Then we had a little bit larger group. We had some cocktails the night before, and there's some of our group that got in before us, and they went down to the marina, and there's commercial fishermen down there, and they bought, this is one side of a lake trout, and cut it up into these pieces, and we cooked it over the fire, and to this day is the best fish dinner I've ever had in my entire life. I mean, everything tastes better in the outdoors, right? So, but yeah, it was amazing. So Gillies looks a little bit different. They've repainted, and this will look like in 2007. Again, here we are, kind of hiked up on the hill, and a little bit different setup there. Totally different boat. Oops. Yeah. Different boat on that trip. That boat's gone. I sold that boat. But yeah, here's a group in 2007. Again, Lee was on that trip. He was on this trip and on that trip. And this guy's out in Colorado now. She's up in near Sleeping Bear Dunes. She's in Ypsilanti. Yeah. This guy moved back to Germany. So then the far end of this island chain is the Red Rock Lighthouse. So we didn't go quite as far on our trip. You had to swing. It's pretty far out in the lake, but we did a lap of this. But I can't imagine, out there in rough weather, manning that lighthouse back in the day as waves are crusting over the top of it. Not much there other than a helicopter pad and a light. And there's the end, I promise. That's it. So any questions? Any questions?
What was the boat in 2007?
Well, that was my Eddy line. Yeah, it was my Eddy line. This is a different boat. So, but this is, again, it's there's only so much you can do in 5-6 days. We did a nice big lap of about 50 miles worth of water. And again, that area you can spend so much time just exploring every single cove if you wanted to. On our earlier trip, not far off of Green Island, we didn't look for it because the weather wasn't bad. There's actually a shipwreck out there called the Seattle. And on the first trip, we had, there's 7 or 8 of us. And we kind of knew where it was at. We kind of knew the coordinates. And we sort of kind of zigzagged looking down in the water. And then eventually you could pick up an anchor chain. And you kind of followed the anchor chain and you found the boiler. And then you found pieces of the ship. And eventually we were able to kind of triangulate where the bulk of the ship was. Again, the water is super clear. And we had brought, goggles with us. So you can kind of hang off the bow of somebody's boat and you kind of look around and see all the pieces and parts and, see the shipwreck off the bottom. I don't think the weather was good enough. It was pretty churned up when we were out there for our trip. But it was just a great way to go in the backcountry. You can socialize, you can eat, you can explore, you can do the paddling type stuff. And so it was a great, kind of a little longer than a long weekend trip. So, yeah, you're good.
I just want to know what you seem to love kayaking. What is it? What is it about kayaking that you really?
I mean, there's for me a connection to the water. I've always been a water guy, and I'm about experiences. Again, I'm kind of a tree hugger, but I'm not super into naturalist type stuff. But I like big water, big scenery, big, the Great Lakes. I kind of follow in the same path as like kind of a hiker. But I don't wear a backpack. I've never been backpacking. I've hiked a lot, but I've never been back. I have all the gear, but I prefer to pack it in a boat. And if it's connected to water, we're all connected by water in some way, shape, or form. But it's just gliding on top of the water, that self-propelled thing. There's no gas other than a granola bar that fed me. You were propelling yourself through the water to get from point A to point B. I enjoy doing it. Unfortunately, we all have to work and do certain things, so retirement's way far away. But yeah, I love being connected to the water. Yeah.
So, your most recent trip was last July or August?
Yeah, the last August is when we were. Yeah.
So what was the range of your daytime temperatures?
It probably hit the high 70s probably during the daytime. It got down into the high 30s, 40s at night. It was chilly. Yeah, not frost, but it was cold. I mean, things are wet and the breeze,
So, all the years that you've been kayaking, what's the most harrowing experience you've ever had?
Harrowing? I mean, we've always, part in the classes we instruct is giving you the tools to make the right decisions too. I've been weathered in places on the North Shore of Lake Superior. We did my Mission of Cotton Island trip. We had some weather coming in, and the goal, so you're North Shore of Lake Superior, Wawa, you know where Wawa is? So you are 40 miles from civilization on the southern end, and you're 70 miles from civilization on the north end. And then Mission of Cotton Island is 10 miles offshore. So we had weather coming in. The goal was to go out and circumnavigate Mission of Cotton Island. And that's, the island itself is 45 miles around. So we were basically 50 miles from the south and more than that from the north. And so we were at a campsite that we got weathered in at, and we knew more weather was coming. So we decided to leave from that campsite. Instead of go 10 miles upshore to make a 10-mile crossing, we left from that campsite, and we did a 20-mile open water crossing in Lake Superior out to Mission of Cotton Island. It took us like 5 hours, and we had a weather window. And that was it. We did 5 hours, and we made it out to the island. And then coming back, we did an 18-mile paddle, and we were going to camp at the southern end of the island. And we had more weather, listen to Radio Canada. We have our VHF radios and all that kind of stuff. And like, man, if we don't leave now, we're not going to leave for several days. So we did an 18-mile day, took a break, and then we did another 10, 12 miles to get back to the mainland. And even then, you're still 40 miles away from nothing. So. Yeah, I mean, I'm not like a super death-defying risk taker. Now, whitewater, that's different. Whitewater, I've done some pretty fun whitewater stuff in West Virginia and Pennsylvania. So,
As far as your navigation, do you, obviously you have some experience with charting and how to use them.
oh yeah.
But do you use a GPS while you go, or are you?
I haven't. Usually there's someone on the trip that does, and it's amazing. It's always fun for me to have my charts and GPS, and we do pretty good. So on this chart here, there's a compass rose right here. So I knew if we did get a fog situation, and we only had 2 crossings going over and coming back. So I knew I could use the compass rose to get where we need to go. And then on our sea kayaks, most of the time, you have a compass and it's not the distance isn't so far where you have to worry about declination and the curvature of the earth, those kinds of things. So you can go off the compass rose and go, okay, I know where I'm going, and keep your heading on your compass and get where you need to get to. But I enjoyed charts and paper and that kind of stuff.
Do you usually have like an e-tip with you?
This trip we didn't. No, I have on the Mission of Cotton Island. We took a satellite phone. Isle Royale, we did a satellite phone one time, first time up there. So yeah, this is probably good to have, but this trip I didn't need it.
When you're packing for a trip like this, how do you know what, as far as your gear, the weight?
The weight? Well, I mean, for me, going out for a weekend or going out for 2 weeks is no different other than your food. And luckily, we're in the Great Lakes, so we pump our water. We don't, I mean, you carry a little bit of water, but it's not like if you were in a sea coastal situation where you do have to, pack in gallons of water. So, I try to, between my boat, my day hatch, I kind of have my smaller items, cook items in the day hatch. Again, you park, kind of your bigger stuff towards the middle of the boat and the smaller stuff as you get towards the ends. There's not anything that's super bulky. You do have to watch out some of the metal items. You have to be careful you're not packing them so they end up underneath your compass, because that could throw your compass off. But I kind of have a system. Because here's the thing I like to do. I like to know where my stuff is. So I'm like, man, I need that one thing. And if I pack my boat different every time, now I got to unload my entire boat versus just being able to go and grab it. So I kind of have a system of where I put my stuff. My boat here has a skeg. So there's a fin that goes up and down in the back of the boat to keep you from weathercocking. So you can utilize that to your advantage. A lot of thin, narrow stuff. If you have tent poles or like my little camp chair, I can put it alongside the skeg box that's in there, and kind of things that can slide up in there. But I got kind of a system I've kind of developed over the years. Your sleep system. I mean, again, if you're out for 1 night or 2 weeks, your sleep system's the same, your tarp system's the same, your clothing essentially is the same. I pack in different layers of things that I can layer if I need to. Just ends up being how much food you want to pack. You always pack at least a couple days extra of stuff. you know, a few extra oatmeal packets or a little bit extra beef jerky, you know, those kinds of things. You know, one of the first trips I ever did, you know, again, hardcore backcountry camping, I think I only packed granola and trail mix. It didn't, after a couple of days, granola and trail mix, there's not a whole lot there that you keep, if you know what I mean. It kind of comes out looking like trail mix. So yeah, so we again, I try to make sure we have enough food, fresh food and things to mix it up. And again, I think this trip we might have gained a couple pounds coming back. Usually I lose weight, but I think we gain weight on this trip. Mm-hmm. Yep.
What is Crownland, and did you see any glacial grooves on your trip?
There was probably glacial grooves on every single island we were on. I mean, they came, you know, the glaciers pushed through there. Crown land is just open land that the public can use, just public land. So, yeah, we can camp. We were able to camp there without a permit. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yeah. Now, there are other parts that we've been to, like the Massasauga. There were permits that we need to go in the Massasauga Provincial Park, which is just south of there. There's a check-in place where you get your permits, and then you have to get your backcountry passes and reserve your campsites ahead of time. You know, but a lot of times, you know, again, it's nice having open area that you don't have to, you know, you can camp wherever you want. When we go do the North and South Manitou off of Sleeping Bear Dunes, if you go to North Manitou, you just have to be 300 feet offshore. But it's open camping. But on South Manitou, you have to get your permits, and you have to, there's designated campsites you have to go to. So it's kind of fun kind of having the world as your oyster and be like, hey, let's camp there. But the problem is that site's good, but the one around the corner could be better, right? You know, so you're like, you know, I think I've drugged Jeff a couple of times, like, we got to find a better site. Like, I just need to get out of the boat now. Yeah, there's always a better campsite around the corner, right? Yeah.
Thanks so much, Eric.
Yeah.
So, hey, this is the last speaker of our Base Camp Story speaker series for this year. If you made some of the other ones, thank you for coming. If you missed it and you're like, what, you had more speakers? Well, you better be tuned in for next time. So online, wcparks.org, you can click on our programs tab and see all the programs we have coming up. Or you can actually sign up for our e-newsletter that gets you one email at the beginning of every month that tells you what's going on, and the link's right there to sign up for the programs online. I do plan on doing the Base Camp Story series next year, but I'm looking for speakers. So if you know anybody who's done any kind of outdoorsy-ish adventure that lives in Northwest Ohio, that's the caveat. Because Northwest Ohio is our base camp. Base camp, right? Okay, so if you know anybody that does any kind of high adventure stuff, whether it's like across the country or it's just around here and they just love doing stuff and being outside, let me know. I can give you my contact information if you know anybody like that. Or if you know somebody like that, that'd be awesome.
And there's a lot of people in this area that are doing these types of things too. In this area, I mentioned the Ontario Kayak Center, and they do groups all the time. So if you did want to get out into this area, if you just Google them, again, I think the ladies group that we saw at Snug Harbor was through the Ontario Kayak Center. And then they also have kind of a flat bottom boat that the front flaps down so they can load kayaks in, that they can take you out into the islands too. So yeah, there's other ways to get out there. I mean, we kind of like to plan our own stuff and go out and kind of do our own thing. But if you did want to go see this area, there's ways to get out there, and there's people that are doing guided trips. So.
And if kayaking is like already your jam and you're looking for some more training, you can always, well, Eric does training, but we also do some training through Wood County Parks. And if you're just getting started, or maybe you're thinking about getting a boat, or you have a boat and you want to be a little more safe and confident in it, we have trainings for that as well through wcparks.org. So that's all I got. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Eric, again.
Demo day?
Oh, Kayak Demo Day is actually mid-June coming up. So if you don't have a boat yet, or you want to check out, maybe upgrade a boat you already have, you can come and you can join Eric, you can join Kelly. What?
River Runners.
Of course, Northwest Ohio River Runners is a fantastic group to be a part of. You can find them on Facebook. What else?
So is it still going to be at Three Meadows? Is that where it's going to be?
Still at Three Meadows Pond.
It's Three Meadows Pond. Yeah, again, if you want to just try something out, it's because they just put boats on the beach all the gear you need. Hop in one, try it out, check it out. We have people out in the water and give you little tips and techniques and those kinds of things. And because a lot of people are like, what do I buy? I don't even know what to buy. I've taught a class for the Toledo Metro Parks for a number of years, this kind of boat buying 101. Because people like, oh, get on Facebook Marketplace and like, wow, for $300 I can get a boat. Well, is it the right boat or not? So kind of what are you looking for? What kind of gear should I need? Where am I going to spend my money? And they always say, buy your second boat first, kind of thing. So we can give you a little more knowledge on what you want to buy and where to buy it and what you're looking for. I even bring some of this kind of stuff if you want to try this out and kind of have some fun. I know I'm teaching a class for the Toledo Metro Parks. Yeah, call me, yeah. So I'm doing essentially a level 3. So level 3 means we can actually go out in open water. If you're an instructor up to level 2, you kind of got to stay in inland lakes. So level 3, we'll actually go out into Maumee Bay and have some fun, and we hope that there's a little bit of wind and waves. So we'll spend 2 days at Wiregrass Lake doing kind of the entry stuff, and then we'll actually go out and do a situational day of things out on the open water, and it's kind of fun. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now that's it, we promise.
Yeah.
Drive safe, check us out at trucks.org. See you later.
I actually emailed Craig today. I'm actually in the process of trying to sell it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Suggestions as to
Facebook Marketplace. If you're on Facebook, it'll sell on Facebook Marketplace. I've bought boats off of there, I've sold boats off of there. It's the easiest way.
that's a good way to go.
Yeah, I mean, you might have to, field a few inquiries from some knuckleheads, but serious buyers, I mean, what kind of boat are you trying to sell?
Say again.
What kind of boat are you trying to sell?
Wilderness